Hey everyone, so in today's episode of Beginner's Guide to Growing Chili Peppers from Seed to Source, we're going to be talking about soil. So this is episode 5. I hope that the other episodes have been useful for you, and let me know in the comments below if there's anything specific you'd like to see. So let's talk about soil. All plants need some sort of medium to grow in. Growing chili plants, you can just use plain compost. So that there, just compost from my garden. And I've sifted it so it's quite fine. You can see there the compost is quite fine. I sift it because when the plants are really young, their roots are small and they need the best chance to be able to get through into the soil and grow and develop. So when the plants are more established and the roots are a bit bigger, then you can use compost that maybe hasn't been sifted, or compost that's got a bit of a thicker grain. Yes, you can grow your plants in pure compost. That probably will work just fine. The problem with compost is, or any soil or anything like that, is after repeated waterings, what's going to happen is this is going to end up becoming quite compacted. Plants are going to battle to get the air that they need. The roots aren't going to be able to breathe. They also possibly won't be able to get to the water that they need. So we add a few things to help out with the plant's root system. 2 things I've been using for the last 10 years without fail, it works brilliantly, is Pearlite and Vermiculite. So with just those 3 things, your compost, your Vermiculite and your Pearlite, you've got a great base for your chili plants. The only thing I've really changed over the last few years with my soil mix is maybe the ratio has been a bit different through the years, but in the last 10 years I think that I've sort of settled on this ratio, which is basically 10 parts soil or compost, 1 part Vermiculite and 1 part Pearlite. So in this bucket here I'm going to eyeball it. This isn't an exact science, you don't need to do it exactly. When I'm doing this outside and I'm doing a big bin of this stuff, then I'm normally taking buckets. I'll do 10 buckets of soil and then 1 bucket of Vermiculite, 1 bucket of Pearlite. So I'm just going to eyeball this. That's the Vermiculite. Vermiculite is quite an interesting thing. It looks a bit like wood. And what it actually is, it's a naturally occurring substance, and it helps with the aeration of the soil, as well as something else it does, which is absorbs moisture quite well. And while it's absorbing the moisture, it's also absorbing the nutrients that are there and allowing that to slowly release over time. So another thing to help with the airiness is Pearlite. So Pearlite, again, it's a naturally formed substance. It's basically a type of volcanic glass, so it's very light, you can hardly feel it here. It has a very unusual property, that is why we are using it for plants, and it's used for many other things, but it has a very unusual property that when you heat it up quite sufficiently, then this expands. It sort of like turns into popcorn. It's very, very light, and this here will allow the roots to have lots of air within the soil. It's a fantastic substance, and again, it is naturally occurring, so you don't need to worry too much about introducing some strange things to your soil. Give it a nice mix and you'll see there, this is what your soil will look like. Now this might look familiar to you if you have bought a commercially available compost that's prepared specifically for tomatoes or for chili peppers. It'll look somewhat similar to this because that's all it is. It's just a combination of Pearlite, Vermiculite and compost. One other thing I am going to add this year is something I talked about in the last episode, fish blood and bone meal. So this is a dry powder, and you don't need a lot of this. So if you talk about the ratios that I'm using in the soil here, where it's 10 parts compost and 1 part Vermiculite, 1 part Pearlite, then this here I would add half a part. So half, if you are going to use a bucket, then I would use half a bucket half a bucket of this within your mix. So I'm going to add a little bit to this. Don't need a lot. So you see there, mix it all in, and that's just going to add some great nutrients into the soil. When I do my next stage with my chili plants, which is going to be potting them up to a bigger size pot, getting them ready to start moving outside, I will use this mix here, and this will give it enough nutrients for at least the first month, maybe month and a half, before I even need to start using any other fertilizer. When I'm watering the plants, I'll just use plain water. And then after about a month and a half, when there's lots of flowers on the plants, that's when we'll start using some nutrients. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying this series. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I'll make sure that I respond to every one of them as soon as I get a moment. Until the next episode, bye-bye.